Dumelang. Welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, 36%. That's how much Eskom wants electricity to increase by. The power utility says the tariff hike request has been influenced by multiple factors, including energy costs, Eskom's operational costs. There's also the issue of consumer and municipal debt and the carbon taxes. But can South Africans who are already under financial strain afford it? The Electricity Minister, the Human Rights Commission, political parties and unions are all against the proposed hike. So how will the National Energy Regulator deal with all of this? NERSA's Executive Manager for Electricity Regulation, Welile Mkhize, will speak to us tonight. Also on the show, former Minister and now Chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Dr. Naledi Pandor, wants EFF leader Julius Malema to issue a public apology over his claims that she was somehow linked to the VBS scandal. Malema made the remarks here on Face the Nation. Dr. Naledi Pandor will speak to us about that and the escalation of tensions in the Middle East. And then later, the former public protector, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, is unhappy about the Supreme Court of Appeal's judgment, which dismissed her bid to review the decision of the Section 194 inquiry that led to her removal from office. In fact, she's gone as far as saying that her ongoing struggle has consistently involved key figures, predominantly figures of Indian descent, who have positioned themselves as her persecutors. That's what she said on Twitter. Those remarks have come under fire, even by Parliament. She'll speak to us tonight. But first, my comment. Can your pocket handle an electricity price hike? Well, Eskom recently sent its multi-year price determination tariff request to NERSA, which will include tariff increases of 36%, 11.8% and 9.1% for the next 5 years, beginning in April next year. And Eskom has indicated that the tariff request has been influenced by multiple factors, including the energy costs, there's Eskom's operational costs, there's the issue of consumer and municipal debt, carbon taxes, you name it. But there's consensus among unions, political parties, and now even the Minister of Energy and Electricity, Dr. Busisiwe, that the proposed 36.1% tariff hike is just simply unacceptable. The minister says any tariff hike that is above 20% from Eskom would be untenable. This is what he said earlier today.
I am confident where I am that the issues around the tariff we can provide some degree of relief. But we are not going to soil the NERSA process. So NERSA is going to run its process. I will make that submission as a minister through that process.
So the minister also said earlier today that government will delay the rollout of carbon taxes beyond 2026 in its proposal for a lower tariff. But I wonder what impact this will have if he can pull it off on the 2025-2026 tariff, because it makes up to only about 1.6% of the proposed increase. The Human Rights Commission has also weighed in here, suggesting that the proposed hike may lead to some social unrest.
The South African Human Rights Commission has made a submission to the energy regulator, NERSA, about the impact of the tariff hike on human rights. We note that, yes, it's not in the Constitution, but it is an enabler to other rights such as housing, food security, as well as health and human dignity. We advise that there has to be a balance between the increase that the Eskom is requesting, but also the impact it would have on the marginalized, especially the poorest of the poor in our community.
So that's what the Human Rights Commission has had to say. COSATU has also weighed in, but the DA has also added its voice as well on this particular issue. But if we're being honest, this increase is simply not sustainable. South Africans are under tremendous financial pressure and have been for some time now. I mean, the cost of living has simply gone too high. So where do they think that the majority of South Africans are going to get the money from? This proposed tariff has huge implications. Your disposable income as households is going to be eroded. This has got huge implications for businesses as well. And that's the point that the minister was making earlier today, that it will lead to greater energy poverty in the country. There are poor families out there who will be choosing between getting the most basic of necessities for their households, like bread and electricity, which is a difficult choice to make. And that's what they'll be subjected to. And I hope the minister will be successful in his negotiations with all the stakeholders involved, including Treasury. NERSA's public consultation process on the tariff hikes will also still unfold. So hopefully this hike will be revised to a lower amount. What do you think of this 36% tariff hike? That's the question we're asking you tonight. How would you be affected by such a steep increase in the price of electricity? Whether you're living alone, or maybe you're living with a family, or maybe you own a business. Let us know what your thoughts are. You can send us a WhatsApp voice note on 078-459-1897. Remember to tell us your name and surname and where you're sending that voice note from. And please keep it at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. Right, let's start the show this morning by speaking to NERSA's acting executive manager for electricity regulation, Welile Mkhize, who's joining us in studio now. Welile, thank you so much for making time for us tonight. There are a lot of South Africans that are unhappy about this tariff hike increase that Eskom is requesting from you guys. There's still a process that will still unfold from your side as NERSA. Let's just start with where things are right now. When do you start the process of price determination?
All right, thank you very much for having me this evening, and good evening to the listeners. Yes, indeed, we have received Eskom's application on the 16th of August last month, and indeed the process has begun to evaluate Eskom's application. Of course, you did mention that we have publicized Eskom's application on our website and on other platforms, as well as the consultation paper, which is a way that we solicit comments from the public. So in that sense, the process has begun.
Eskom often, places a large part of the blame, even for this 36% tariff hike increase that it wants next year, on you as NERSA, because they always feel like you haven't been granting them their requests for higher increases in recent years.
Yeah, we have indeed seen some of the, on the media and so on, some of those, that type of rhetoric. However, to speak in terms of, the requirements of the law, NERSA is required by law to determine Eskom's tariffs. It's usually on a 3-yearly basis. We call them MYPD cycles. We are currently on MYPD 6, so we've gone through 5 cycles, and this is the 6th one. And I believe it's disingenuous to say that NERSA has not given Eskom the kind of tariffs that it would deem to be efficient, because the law requires us to only give them what is deemed to be efficient. So we do have to do prudency tests, make sure that we stick to what the law says, that the costs, or rather the revenues that we grant for them to collect through tariffs, are the efficiently incurred costs. So in doing this, if it is seen to for us to be not granting what they believe they should be getting, is completely disingenuous.
How do you determine that efficiency in your price determination? Because you have this tough balancing act between Eskom's financial requirements, but also you have to consider the pocket of the consumer as well. So how do you go about determining the efficiency of that pricing modeling?
Yeah, so we do have what we call prudency guidelines. They are publicly available for the public to scrutinize, which guide us in terms of what is considered to be efficient. So maybe just as an example, we also use benchmarking to say if a utility of similar size as Eskom does maintenance, how much does it cost to, for example, maintain a boiler and so on. So if Eskom's costs are much higher, then we, by law, have to ensure that those costs are in line with what other utilities, for example, are spending on maintenance. We have a plethora of other considerations. Remember, there's different types of costs, maintenance costs, operational costs. However, Eskom should be able to substantiate as to why they have asked for the 36% in their application. Ours is to process the application. We are required by the National Energy Regulator Act that if we are faced with an application, we have to process it according to our processes.
And what considerations do you make for the consumer?
There are considerations for the consumer. You'll recall even last year, sorry, not last year, but when we made our last determination on MYPD6, that some of the customer categories were not fully exposed to the 18% that was actually determined. They were exposed to a much single-digit increase. I think it was 9 to 10% or so, and that is for the indigent customers. So in that way, we definitely do consider the plight of our people, particularly the poor. But of course, having said that, we are also endeavoring to ensuring that we move closer towards cost-reflective tariffs for the people that can afford to actually pay for electricity. Otherwise, Eskom is not a sustainable concern.
Yeah. So COSATU says that it's calculated Eskom's proposed electricity tariff increase to be, I think, 9 times the current rate of inflation. How do we manage that, especially because Eskom is a monopoly and your job is to ensure that it does not abuse its market position? And is that the right calculation by COSATU as well?
Well, the current rate of inflation is around 5%. So if you use the 36%, which is of course just the application, that is then becomes 5 times. That's about 6 times rather, the inflation. However, that is just the application. We cannot preempt what the final outcome after the application has gone through NERSA's processes will be. So for us to sit and talk about what Eskom has applied for and preempt the decision of the energy regulator, because remember, the decision is made only by the energy regulator, which is a body of 9. Having considered all the facts that I have alluded to, including the issues of the social the socio-economic issues that the country is facing. So for us to preempt that outcome would not be the right thing to do.
When can we expect that determination to be made? I mean, as you would understand, South Africans are on edge because when they heard that this is how much Eskom is asking for, they're just thinking, my goodness, it's going to be difficult to really continue to sustain themselves. And there are many various stakeholders that are calling on you to reject Eskom's proposed tariff hike. I mentioned the Human Rights Commission. The minister said he will be following some processes as well, understanding that as NERSA you've got a separate process, but you still have the public consultations. When can we expect that determination to be made? And is it possible that there can be a process that exists parallel to your usual processes where you consider representations by these stakeholders?
Yeah, so we are guided by the law, and so whatever we do, it has to be within the confines of the provisions of the Act. So for us to be able to get or to solicit the comments from the public, you have mentioned that there will be a public consultation process, which will begin on around the 18th of November and end around the 4th of December. So part of what we will be doing is to solicit the comments from the public. So it's not a parallel process, it is the tariff determination process. We have to, according to the law, it's the Public Administration Act. It requires us to get the, the comments from affected and interested stakeholders, which is the public. So we have to do that. Touching on the matter of, the minister, of course, ours should be, and the public should expect us to do things according to the law. However, if government, the minister decides that through policy instruments, that they want to, to do whatever they feel needs to be done to rescue or to come to the aid of the public, they will make that decision. However, we will do what is required of us to do by the law and provide those numbers publicly.
But as far as the law stands right now, you have to go through this separate process. You can't entertain anything else at this moment.
We cannot entertain. We are regarded, or we are not just regarded, but we are an independent energy regulator.
Okay, I need you to please clarify the electricity tariff determination methodology. I saw what the DA, it must have been the DA recently, who mentioned that there's an inappropriate pricing methodology that is being used here that is not founded in the Electricity Regulation Act, but rather on the repealed 1987 Eskom Act, if I'm not mistaken. Can you just clarify that for us?
Yeah, so that type of rhetoric is quite disingenuous in my view, because whatever regulatory instruments that we use, they go through similar processes, even as we have been talking about the tariff determination process. We, as a regulator, are required to interpret the law as regulatory instruments. So as we are busy processing the application of Eskom currently, we have a methodology that is approved by the energy regulator, which went through all the processes, including consulting the public as well as stakeholders in the industry. You are talking here about Eskom, the energy intensive users, and all the other experts in the industry. They have commented on this current methodology, and it was regarded as to be in line with the law or in compliance with the law. However, if you touch on other methodologies, like the methodology that we use to determine municipal tariffs, that is another matter altogether. This is something that you might have also, you might know that it was last year when there was a declaration by Judge Kubushi that said that the municipal tariff methodology is not in line with Section 15 of the Act. And so as a regulator that endeavors to, to stick within the confines of the law, we had to find a methodology that is indeed compliant with the Act, which is what we are currently. We've used this new methodology for the 2024-25 tariff review period.
So for South Africans who are concerned about this 36% who want to submit their comments to you about how unaffordable this is, whether it's businesses or organizations or individuals, how do they go about doing that? When does your public consultation process begin?
Well, what we call a notice and comment process has already started, where we receive written comments. So if they go to our website, as well as on our social media platforms, on Twitter and so on, or it's now called X, so they can then be able to access the consultation paper and make their comments. All the instructions and details are on the consultation paper as to how they can submit their comments.
Okay. There's something we heard sometime last year, if I'm not mistaken, when the president indicated that I think Eskom had asked for a tariff hike and you had issued it. It must have been 18%, if I'm not mistaken, or another number thereabout. But the president came out and said, well, we'll try and intervene here. Speaking publicly at a gathering, and there was some confusion there about what the law says and whether or not the president even has space within the law to intervene or even come speak to Eskom or speak to you as Nessa. My understanding is that if you're unhappy about the determination that Nessa has made, you can go to court. Can there be some kind of intervention from the government, whether from the electricity minister or from even the president, once the determination has been made?
Yeah, so firstly, let's just understand the process, that is used when we determine the tariffs. We have to use the methodology that we've spoke about, which is the MYPD methodology. It has got, it guides the regulator in terms of how we determine the tariff. So we have to follow that methodology. So that is what we need to do to determine a number, which is what we call the average tariff, that is based on the allowable revenue that Eskom can actually collect from the public using the instruments of the tariff. So there is no interference. That number, it has to be according to the calculations that are done to determine that. If there are decisions that that government wants to make, regarding that, it is outside of that process. We follow the government policy. So if government policy changes and say do things differently, then we wait. Like for example, there is the new Electricity Amendment Act that was assented to by the president recently. That becomes our marching orders. So government can change the policy at any given time, but it has to be through the formalities of the acts, as well as the the instruments that the government uses.
But as per the current policy, there's no space for that level of intervention, unless you go to court.
There isn't. If anyone obviously wants to challenge the decision of the regulator, they have to go to the High Court.
To the court.
Yes.
All right. Yes. Welile Mkhize, NERSA's Executive Manager for Electricity Regulation, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. Now, former Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pandor, is demanding a public apology from EFF leader Julius Malema for alleging that she received a bond from the now collapsed VBS Mutual Bank. Pandor has already denied ever applying for or receiving a VBS loan. So Dr. Naledi Pandor joins us now via Teams to talk about this and the escalating tensions in the Middle East. Dr. Pandor, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening. Welcome to Face the Nation.
Good evening, Clement, and thank you for the opportunity. Good evening to your viewers as well.
Let me start our conversation by just giving you that opportunity to respond to what the EFF leader Julius Malema said about you on this show a few weeks ago. I know your lawyers have contacted him and his lawyers have responded to your lawyers. So for those who missed what Malema said, here is what he said about Dr. Pandor when I was asking him about the VBS scandal.
Naledi Pandor was also in the VBS bond or something, which she was there. They are your darlings. You will never know their names. You know the names of those you don't like, to demonstrate there's no principle.
So that's what Julius Malema said. Dr. Pandor, you have since categorically denied any links to VBS, and from what I picked up between your lawyer's conversations with Malema's lawyers, he seems to suggest that he wasn't really trying to harm your reputation, but to rather contribute to the public conversation on VBS. What do you expect him to do now?
Well, I've actually lost hope with respect to Mr. Malema. I had thought that he would be the leader that he claims to be, a brave, courageous young leader, that he would stand up and admit that the slur that he cast on me was absolutely dishonest and very far from any factual knowledge of myself or my family. I'm really quite shocked that he's lacked the courage to stand up and rather through his lawyers speaks about it was adding to the political debate. There was no intention to harm me. I mean, he says, yes, Naledi Pandor. I mean, really, what more can one do in terms of harming a person?
Yeah.
But as I say, perhaps I shouldn't be surprised and I should leave the matter there. I'm glad that I have received this letter through my lawyer from his lawyers, and in it, they clearly on his behalf admit that he was flying a kite.
Yeah, and I mean, you in your correspondence, the correspondence between your lawyers, you can see that he seems to be backtracking now and saying, well, that's not really what I was trying to do, linking her to VBS. Am I correct to say, Dr. Pandor, that you are not going to take this any further? So if he doesn't issue this public apology, you are going to leave it there? Your lawyers are not going to try and take this through the courts?
We're still discussing, but really, I'm not sure as to what value. I hope one day Mr. Malema will have the maturity to actually say, I was wrong. I'm hoping for that. He claims to be a leader that can be trusted by South Africans, but he's been dishonest in front of thousands of the South African public. And for those who support him, it must be a real horror, because many people in the social media believed what he said and made comments about me, which were in line with the lie that he had uttered. So I'm glad that his lawyers on his behalf have cleared it up. I will discuss with our lawyers. I believe he has defamed me, but is it worth pursuing given, the character that we're seeing?
How have you been affected by those remarks? I mean, a lot of people were shocked to hear him make that claim. And we already, at the time, in fact, we're already beginning to see people even beginning to question your integrity, people that have always said you are someone who's always conducted herself with integrity. What kind of impact did you see following those remarks that he made?
Well, on social media, there was a slew of comments that believed Mr. Malema and said things like, you see, these are, these politicians, they're corrupt. We're glad Mr. Malema has exposed Naledi Pandor. She's always pretended, and so on. So he harmed, my human dignity. But his lawyers have, somewhat soothed my temper. Nonetheless, I am still very, very offended. I had hoped for more from him because, he's been a person who always claims to speak out when there's something wrong, and that he can confront any situation with courage. But he has shown himself, as far as I'm concerned, not to be brave, and he merely used my name for his own populist intentions.
All right, let's talk now about what's happening in the Middle East. Things have incredibly escalated. Israel is now fighting in Lebanon. Their soldiers are there on the ground. They're fighting in Yemen, fighting in Gaza, and now they're about to retaliate to Iran. Is there a danger here in your view, as someone who has had an interest in these matters, even when you were international relations minister, is there a danger here of a wider regional war? Are we on the cusp of World War III?
Well, I'm not sure I would cast it as World War III, but I fully agree with the statement issued by our government that we should call for peace, and we should call for tempers to cool, and for maturity, and also for the most powerful in the world, the closest to Israel, to actually have an intervention which would calm the situation and not exacerbate the looming disaster that we are all observing. I certainly think we should stop saying, will there be an escalation? There is an escalation. We don't want it to grow even further. So I believe we now need adults to stand up in the room and to become directly involved in stopping this tragedy.
But those adults have not been stepping up, and in cases where they stepped up, they're not being listened to. So what do you think can be done differently? And what is the responsibility here, even of Israel's ally, the US, in this crucial moment? Because my understanding is that President Joe Biden has indicated that he doesn't support an Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear sites, but seems to believe that Israel must retaliate in some way, but proportionally.
Well, I've always been worried that all of us are talking while lives are being lost. We have to stop the carnage. And the key issue is, of course, the freedom of the Palestinian people. We need to intervene. We must stop the loss of lives in Lebanon. And any step that can be taken toward peace is going to be what all of us look toward. And really, in the final analysis, the most important countries in a process toward peace are the United States of America and its allies in Europe. It is for them to stand up. It is for our leaders to encourage them to take action that would result in an end to the conflict. So I hope the world's leaders are speaking to each other, because a terrible situation could unfold in the next few days or a week if they do not intervene decisively. What we need now is leadership.
If we experience a wider regional war, what in your view are the possible implications for us as developing countries? And as you speak about the need for leadership now, where is the United Nations in all of this? Can they even do anything, given how what they have said in the past to try and avoid the situation escalating to this point has fallen on deaf ears? I mean, as we speak now, Israel has declared the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres as persona non grata.
Well, your assessment is probably far better than my own. I'm not a political scientist or an analyst on these matters, but I am very, very worried that we are seeing a spreading of the conflict, and we're beginning to see really an intention to respond very actively to the actions of Israel. So what we need to do is address the key issue, which is Palestinian human rights and freedom. This must be addressed, and security for Israel as well. This can only be done by the most powerful countries in the world. In terms of an impact on the developing world, clearly, if you have a sudden a threat of this nature, there's an impact on oil prices likely. This affects our own hope and ambition for improved economic performance. So we also have to step in as an important country on the African continent to make our voice heard, and even articulate through the African Union a strong call for action. And we have partnerships with countries in the north, with Europe, with the United States of America. Our leaders need to be very engaged, because all of us will be affected should the disaster that many anticipate unfold.
Yeah, and speaking of the African continent, there's a debate that's been ongoing, and President Cyril Ramaphosa was trying to push for this when he was in New York a week ago about the United Nations Security Council, because we should be looking towards it, really, even in time of this crisis. But it itself is mired in politics and brotherhood, where these P5 countries back each other, and often not on principle, but because they're big brothers, they're allies. So they end up abusing that veto power to protect each other. What are your reflections on the US's proposal for us to be represented in the United Nations Security Council? Because the US seems to be supporting Africa to have at least 2 permanent seats on the Security Council, but that may come without the veto powers. So what would then be the point?
Well, when we have previously referred to reform of the United Nations, part of the reform is certainly looking at the Security Council, its functioning, decision-making, and the role of the General Assembly. So I think you can't have reform of one part without looking at the whole. And if we go back to vetoes that are limited to a few, then we haven't really altered the status quo. So I think what we need to look at is the desirability of a veto, how it operates, when it operates, greater democratization, greater inclusion, because the Charter says we are all equal sovereign states, but we have very little decision-making power in contrast to the Security Council.
Yeah.
So I think there's much more that needs to be debated and decided upon when you talk about UN reform. It's not small steps. It needs to be a fundamental reform, which is democratization, increased representation, efficiency, and greater protection of the most vulnerable in the world.
All right. Dr. Naledi Pandor, thank you so much for making time for us this evening. After the break, we'll speak to the former public protector, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, former public protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane has described the Supreme Court of Appeal's decision to dismiss her appeal as a significant personal and professional setback. The court struck off the roll Mkhwebane's application to appeal the judgment that led to a removal from office and also issue costs rulings against her. She joins us now via Teams. Advocate Mkhwebane, thank you for making time for us this evening. Welcome to Face the Nation. I think you are muted there, Advocate.
Good evening, Clement. Good evening to your listeners. And in Africa. Thank you.
Let's start with this judgment from the Supreme Court of Appeal. What's your reaction to it?
Very disappointed, Clement. I, didn't expect that. I mean, the judge was in the first place very rude towards my legal team during the proceedings on the 28th of August. I mean, if you are an applicant, you presenting your matter before the court, you should be accommodated and present your matter. Then the judgment is issued and, it goes on and on about, actually in the first place, when you struck the matter of the roll, why are you going ahead and issuing a judgment and writing all this unnecessary judgment and attack the legal counsel, and degrade him to somebody who doesn't even know the law or who can't even research. Yeah. I mean, that's judicial misconduct in the first place.
One of the things that the judges said was that by the time the appeal was heard, by the SCA, the committee's work was long done in Parliament and you had already been impeached. So the appeal was moot as it was long overtaken by events. What would you have wanted this to come to? And what would have been the practical effect of the determination of the court? Because the restoration to office, as they argued, would be constitutionally and factually impossible given where things are now.
Clement, in the first place, as you would remember or know, South Africans, that when I lodged the appeal, remember I applied for a recusal Gajanji and Mailham. Mailham being the husband to Mazon, and Janji having made those comments during the committee and the bribery allegations. And they refused to recuse themselves. We then went to the Western Cape High Court. The judges there didn't want to deal with the merits of the matter. They just said, I must just continue being subjected to the abuse and I must just take the report on review. And they ended up acknowledging that they've made an error of law. They should have dealt with the merits of the matter. Therefore, the matter must be taken to the SCA. Clement, I appealed in June 2023. I was still the public protector. And if they were efficient as the SCA, I mean, they should have adjudicated the matter before my removal in September. But that doesn't stop there. Why, in the first place, I'm before them? It's because the public protector and the person of the public protector is one person. I appealed that judgment for them to deal with the unlawfulness, the illegality of the Section 194 committee. And you are saying, yes, the muteness, not take the matter back. But then for them, they were supposed to even say, let's hear the facts and of the matter. In the first place, they even got the facts wrong. Hearing the facts, Clement, they were supposed to determine, is it correct for Mailham to be the adjudicator or the decision maker on my removal and Janji and facing the allegations of bribery? Yeah. And secondly, you remember as well, we included the issue that they continued with the matter without my legal representation, violating the Constitutional Court judgment on legal representation. They continued when I was sick and hearing other witnesses. So all those illegalities, they should have determined and dealt with them, but they failed to do that. So they only focused on the fact that there's no applicant before them.
So does this then mark the end of your fight in as far as your impeachment as public protector is concerned?
How does it end, Clement? Because the fact of the matter, I mentioned that I'm not fighting for myself. I'm fighting for the system. You can't treat a constitutional institution incumbent like how I was treated. What about an ordinary public servant and a person on the street? If you will allow legislatures to treat a Chapter 9 institution like this, the High Court to even just turn a blind eye, the Supreme Court of Appeal also turn a blind eye. Remember, the matter is struck off the roll. And we're still checking the options. If you struck the matter off the roll, how do we make sure that the matter, finally, the merits are heard and you indicate and take a decision whether it's fine for people to abuse their positions and even use the courts to abuse the rights of constitutional institutions, rights holders?
You posted on Twitter that, and I quote here, my ongoing struggle has consistently involved key figures, predominantly of Indian descent, who have positioned themselves as my persecutors. These individuals include Pravin Gordhan, Bawa, who was the evidence leader, Adhikari, who is the chief legal advisor of Parliament, Hassan Ibrahim, so-called expert witness, Ivan Pillay, witness, and Fatima Ibrahim, legal advisor of Parliament. Judge Ponan's attitude further underscores the challenges and biases I have been faced in my quest for justice, end quote. Why did you specifically finger these people of Indian descent?
For me, it's just a trend, which when I was sitting and I was asking myself, what do I make of this? And I'm not insulting any person, and it's a fact that they are of Indian descent. And I mean, to add to that, Clement, is that I'm raising this issue for further debate. Can this be so glaring that it's perpetuating like this? Currently, there's other persecutions I'm facing from state institutions, which when I mention them again, I'd be accused as if I'm attacking those particular people. But for me, it's what I'm raising, and it's issues to be debated. And the fact of the matter is, my biggest challenge also, the investigation of the so-called rogue unit, and the treatment I received from the late Pravin Gordhan, perpetuated all this persecution. It's as if I was fighting him when I was doing my work. So I don't understand when it's like perceived as if now I am attacking Indians and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, this is the factual position which is there.
Yeah. But it's not only people of Indian descent who have criticized you or ruled against you. You may remember there are other judges who are not of Indian descent who have even described your reports when you were public protector as vague, as contradictory. Some said they were nonsensical, irrational, unconstitutional. I think some judges and justices have gone further to rule that you acted in bad faith, you were biased, you put together a number of falsehoods, and you didn't even understand your constitutional duties and lied under oath. These judges were from different races as well. So why then specifically pick on this particular race? Advocate, can you hear us? Oh, I think we may have lost Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane there. We're going to try and re-establish that line with her. I think maybe these are just technical challenges with the network. But Parliament... Yeah,
I'm back.
Oh, you're back, Advocate. Thank you. Please, if you can respond to that question.
I've heard your question.
Go ahead.
Clement, I don't know why you're including the other judges, because here I'm mentioning the people who were dealing with this matter of my persecution. You'd remember, I can mention a number of the very same people who were involved in those, and the judges you are mentioning. During my testimony, I've mentioned where they also have gone wrong themselves. I mean, Abobako, I'm mentioning that. I've mentioned in the report that I never saw the Inspector General report, factual wrong things. The issue of the so-called Abramje, who said, I've heard it on good authority, that the judgment will be against Mkhwebane. And indeed, those things, those people who were involved, they, it's questionable things which I have evidence. And to come back to the issue of the so-called, or what you are saying, that yes, I'm facing those perjury allegations. There were some charges which were withdrawn. I'm going to court on the 10th of October, again, trying to put it across that there's no perjury here. The official who was investigating the matter was one of the witnesses who was very clear. He's the one who wrote all those things. It's not me who wrote those notes and everything. I was not dishonest. I did my work with dignity. I succeeded in doing my work. I mean, unfortunately, they use that to make sure that they will taint and repeat. You guys repeat and repeat and repeat that this person is incompetent. Unfortunately, I wouldn't just keep quiet and not exercise my rights.
And I do remember the times
for others who are facing persecution,
I do remember the times when you have criticized some of those people. But I also am trying to remember even people like Bakwa. Have you ever come out to actually reference their race when you criticize them? Because in this case, you are specifically mentioning people of Indian descent, even though there are other people who were of different races who have been hard on you, who have taken you on who have criticized you fairly and unfairly, according to you, who have judged against you, but suddenly now you are making a specific reference to a race.
Well, it's a trend which is there, and I can mention even the blacks and the tribes or the nation, the ethnic group they fall into. I can say to you, this ethnic group, you start from the speaker to the this and this and this. This is the ethnic group they belong to. Here, Clement, there was nothing I was trying to raise. I'm raising an issue for debate, and I'm saying it's concerning that this is at the center of what Pravin Gordhan tried to put, and I faced this persecution because I investigated him and I was doing my work, and without any, fear, favor, or prejudice. And remember again, the investigations in the Public Protector's Office are conducted by the investigators. As a decision maker, you come at the end, and there's nowhere where you can put things which are not there and which is not based on evidence.
Parliament has characterized what you have said as racial slurs against people of Indian descent. In fact, they're saying your remarks are regrettable. Will you be apologizing? Are you prepared to take them back?
I clarified that matter. Some Star newspaper called, and I said to them, you know what, I'm clarifying. I don't mean to, cause any or perception that I am attacking. Those legal advisors, they're hardworking, but then at the end of the day, yes, I'm prepared to just say, if they think it's like that, it's concerning as well for Parliament to think that it's racial slur. Read that thing again and again and ask yourself, was I discriminating or being racist or being hateful? I'm mentioning what is currently the situation. So indeed, I'm willing to say, okay, let's then forget about race, and let me mention them by name, or even mention that, my challenge is as also falls from what the late Pravin Gordhan did to my demise.
So to make sure that I'm hearing you clearly, you apologize to those that may have been offended by those remarks you made, as you referenced.
Definitely.
All right. Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, I appreciate your time on Face the Nation tonight. And I appreciate your time for watching the Thursday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Thanks for watching. Cheers.